Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History, U.S. History Edition. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of primary sources regarding the attacks on Fort Sumter. And today's a really good example of the importance of perspective on history. We're going to be reading accounts from a newspaper in the North and a newspaper in the South regarding the same event, and you're going to get a very different understanding of that event based on that perspective. So for my students in particular, before you even read the document, or in this case, listen to it, what I want you to do is take a moment and just start with your source. So document A is working from the Fremont Journal, which is from Fremont, Ohio. It's written on April 13th of 1861. So before you even start reading, right in here, I want you to think about what the source already can tell you about perspective and answer those first few questions before you even read, or in this case, listen to this perspective from the Fremont Journal. As always, when we're working with these Stanford History Education Group documents, they do a really nice job of highlighting some of the key vocabulary in the particular source, and they're usually, again, bolded in here and then defined down here. So if you're unsure of what the word means, check with the vocabulary. All right, let's look at document A first. So we're looking at the Fremont Journal, and again, this has been modified from its original version, largely condensed. Extra. Saturday morning, April 13th, 1861. The war commenced. We are indebted to Mr. Brown, the gentlemanly telegraph operator at this place, for the following dispatches, which were received last night up to 12 o'clock, and this is in the a.m. By these dispatches, it will be seen that the treason, which has long been rife in Charleston, has at last culminated in war. The rebels will now be treated in a different manner than they anticipated. They have brought down vengeance on their heads. The country waits with breathless anxiety to know the results of this attack. We believe the government is sufficient for the emergency. Without further remarks, we give the dispatches. Charleston, South Carolina, April 12th. The ball has opened. War is inaugurated. The batteries of Sullivan Island, Morris Island, and other points were opened on Fort Sumter at 4 o'clock this morning. Fort Sumter has returned the fire, and a brisk cannonading has been kept up. No information has been received from the seaboard yet. The military are under arms, and the whole of our population are on the streets, and every available space facing the harbor is filled with anxious spectators. The troops are pouring into the city by the thousands. Not a casualty has yet happened to any of the forces of the 19 batteries in position. Only 7 have opened fire on Fort Sumter. The remainder are held in reserve for the expected fleet. That's the incredible thing about the attack on Fort Sumter. The only casualty is a horse in the entire attack. It's pretty incredible. Again, check out those vocabulary words down here for definitions. Much like you did with document A, the very first thing I want you to do as you're analyzing this one, for my students in particular, is look at where it's coming from. So it's coming from the Dispatch, Richmond, Virginia. Again, April 13th, 1861. So you're going to see a very different perspective. And based on what you know about the sectionalism we've been talking about in class and the divide that the country was seeing politically, what can you already sort of understand, given what you know, the context you understand from the attack on Fort Sumter, and just the differing opinions that we've mentioned here? So again, take a moment, even before you read, look at those first few questions that I'm asking you to kind of investigate, and just tell me what you think you already know based on just knowing where it's coming from. And again, We've got our vocabulary words defined down here. All right, let's take a look at document B, the Daily Dispatch. And again, this has been modified, mostly condensed from its original text. The war begun. It will be seen that under the military compulsion of the immense fleet, an army which the Black Republican president has sent to subjugate Charleston, the Carolina forces have been forced in self-defense to attempt the reduction of that fort, which has so long menaced their homes and firesides, and which Lincoln had formally notified them he was about to supply, peaceably if he can, forcefully if he must. That's a quote from Lincoln. A notification which, backed by the immense naval and military force, was, of course, a declaration of war. The people of Charleston have been actually supplying Major Anderson and his officers with provisions, exhibiting a spirit of generosity unprecedented in the history of war. In the midst of the negotiations, a fleet larger than England keeps in the Channel, referring to the English Channel. An army of 3,000 soldiers has been suddenly sent by the government to attack Morris's Island and force provisions and probably men into Fort Sumter. The irrepressible conflict which has been forced upon the peaceful home and the unoffending citizens of the South will be met by the people who will drench their native soil with the blood of their invaders or perish to the last man in vindication of all that man holds dear. That man holds dear. So, as you listen, as you read, for my students in particular, focus on perspective here. What's different in each of these accounts? Why does the account from the Fremont Journal, coming again out of Ohio, differ from the Daily Dispatch that you get out of Richmond? What are some of the key details that are different? What do they both say about who to blame? What do they both say about the opposing force? So in other words, how are the sort of traitors that are mentioned in, or the rebels also as they're kind of called, how are they mentioned in the Fremont Journal? How is the government and Lincoln in particular seen by the Daily Dispatch? So as you listen, as you read, think about the importance of perspective. Use those guiding questions. And again, thank you so much for listening to this edition of Mr. Merrigan's Moments in History.